Mi gente, you already know who it is. It's Danny Limelight. And I need all of you to subscribe to According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and all other platforms.
What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. He is one of my good brothers, and he is the star of the MMA Power Hour, found on Fight, Facebook. I mean, literally everywhere that you can shake a stick at. He is the one and only Colin Crandall. Colin, what's going on?
All good, my friend. I tell you, you are one of my good friends and brothers. I admire you. You're one of the best interviewers in this business. I'm so glad to be here with you and grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Obviously, we've talked at length, over the course of the years, like how you and the MMA Power Hour have shaped, kind of how I do things, because it's kind of weird to look at like a Rogan or what have you and go like, man, that seems so far off, right? And the fact, like, I think I texted you the day that I found out that you guys were going to Fight and then again to like DirecTV, and I'm all like, yes, you made it. Somebody from our kind of community, like, they made it. Like, I look at you, I look at like Rafa Esparza with Verbal Tap, and like Donna Gonzalez that was doing mat therapy. To me, you guys are, you guys set the tone for what I would become. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate the kind words.
Thank you, man. It means a lot. We're still striving to get better and better. And, there's definitely some more making it we'd like to do in some other regards, especially like with finances and like that, and even reach more viewers. But, thank you, man, for saying that. And we're really grateful for the opportunities that we have. Being on Fight TV now for about 2 years, and then being on the 11 Sports US and For the Fans channel on ATT, DirecTV, Pluto, Roku, and all these other channels for about 6-7 months now. And we're grateful for it. But you know what I mean? If anyone else has those opportunities in our whole group of media people, you're one of the people that are most deserving. I will say 100%.
You're too kind, too kind. And Irv A says, we live. Yes, we are, good sir. And thank you for joining us here on YouTube. And it's also simulcast on Facebook. So thank you, good sir. But my goodness, like, I want to know, like, how did you, get involved in combat sports? But before I get to that, John Parker says, great stuff. Much respect, guys. Much respect to you. Again, John Parker, a pro wrestler and mixed martial artist. So kudos to you, John Parker.
Thank you, John. Thank you much, John. I went to school with a guy named John Parker, but he'd be too old to be involved in wrestling at this point. So it's not this one. But what's up, John? Thanks for the respect, man. Wrestling is a rough business. Big respect to you to be in it.
Yeah, so, I mean, how did you get involved in combat sports?
Well, I would say that when I was a kid, I'm old enough, well, I shouldn't say that, but when I was a kid, there was still a lot of talk about Bruce Lee, his passing, and Bruce Lee, being, a legend. And I guess really that hasn't stopped. So that doesn't really make me old, because people are still today talking about Bruce Lee. And I was born in Detroit and grew up outside of Detroit and in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they were playing a lot of Bruce Lee movies still years after his passing at movie theaters. And I saw him, and just for some reason it spoke to me. I really, really understood that this is an amazing thing that we should know, this combat from the Far East. I took judo for a very short time. I don't know why. I guess I was just not really understanding the concept of it, and it was really different from what I was seeing from Bruce Lee, albeit for a couple of moves that he did. But I wish I had, because I was friends with Judo Gene LaBelle now, and I could have been maybe a judo black belt had I been that talented, had I stayed with it, but I didn't. But I basically stopped that as a kid, but was always interested in combat sports. I had a couple uncles that were world-ranked boxing contenders many years earlier, great uncles, yeah. So this goes way back. One of them was friends with a boxer, Joe Louis. in Detroit, because that's where Joe was born in Alabama, but was raised mostly in Detroit, starting as a teenager. So it was kind of in my blood. And then when I was 18, I first started taking martial arts, enrolling in Hapkido, and then I trained in American Kempo, and then Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so was always really interested in combat sports. Not only that, but as far as watching, man, and this goes way back to probably about when you were being born, but they would have kickboxing, which was called full contact karate back then. And I was very young. But I would watch it. I would watch it on a Sunday. I would sneak up if my parents didn't know at midnight and watch it, when it was on TV, because they would throw it up at these crazy times because people are like, full contact karate. Who's going to want to watch that? We'll throw it on Sunday or at 1 a.m. You know what I mean? But I would watch that, and I was really into it, and I would buy the magazines. And back then, before the internet, if you couldn't see a televised kickboxing fight, which mostly you couldn't, because there are only a few, you had to read in the magazines about all these other fighters. And same thing with boxing. There wasn't enough channels for boxing. And so I would read all these magazines about all these guys over in Europe, Asia, Africa, that I never had a chance to see. And I got to know them only by reading about their fights. And I got a magazine, I think it was in like 1992, and it said the best top 5 most exciting boxing matches for the last 100 years. And I read it cover to cover every year. At one point, I could have told you pretty much all of them, all 500 of those best matches. But I remember going back to the 1800s and some of these incredible matches, like, Stanley Ketchel fighting, Billy Papke or something in a incredibly, wild snow and hailstorm, fighting 45 rounds, or battling Nelson, coming back to fight a guy who had cold cocked him when he went to shake his hand before the match, and then literally the guy cold cocked him and then beat the crap out of him for 75 rounds after that. And then the rematch, Nelson comes back, I think that was like another snowstorm or rainstorm, and just beats the crap out of that guy. And just reading about Jack Johnson and, Jack Dempsey and all these amazing people back then. And so it stayed a passion year after year after year. And then I was fortunate enough to have a friend that was a chiropractor who was a bit older than me. In fact, his son was also in our karate school. And the dad started studying with the Gracies in their garage in like 1989 or 90, right? And so he started to tell me about this and actually put a couple of holds on me. And I'm like, wow, what the hell is that? And he said, yeah, it's this thing called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is what it was, right? And he said you can come by once in a while. So I think after he had earned like 2 belts, they said they gave him permission to show beginners, some beginning stuff. And once in a blue moon, I would get down there. He was like 20 miles from where I lived. I didn't have that reliable a car, so I didn't make it there as much as I wish I would have. But he actually had a copy of the press kit for UFC 1 before the event and gave me a Xerox copy of it. And I remember looking at it, and I, having been a big boxing fan and a kickboxing fan, and I said, this is amazing. By the way, before that, I had seen the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in action, number 1 and 2 VHS tapes, right? So I knew what that was about in 1990. And so, or 91, I think it was. But in 93, when he showed me the press kit before the November UFC 1, I said, this is amazing, but who the hell is going to sanction this? I don't see any boxing commission sanctioning this anywhere. And he said, yeah, well, Denver doesn't have an athletic commission for combat sports. And that's how, a lot of people may not have known that, that's how they got there. Those were the only places they were going. Wyoming, other places that had no athletic commission for combat sports. And but it's just, I knew right from the beginning that this was going to be an amazing sport. And I knew right before the beginning what was going to happen in those early fights, that a Hoist was going to take people out to deep water and drown them. And so as far as a non-participant in professional MMA, and as far as not being a promoter, but being an observer and a longtime martial artist, I think that I have one of the best perspectives and point of references out there. But if you want to talk about someone that not only has the perspective, but was there, Mr. John Peretti is someone you guys want to look at, because I interviewed John twice, and he was actually there. Not that it discredits or diminishes my involvement and being knowledgeable about it so early, but I want to let you guys know I definitely defer 100% to the guys that were actually involved. And for those of you that don't know, John Peretti is one of the guys that was promoting, training a black belt. So yeah, if you want a double, a guy who was actually involved in the sport way back then from the beginning, look up John Peretti, P-E-R-R-E-T-T-I.
No, and that's to me, I think it's awesome. And in terms of like MMA, remember the term, right? MMA, mixed martial arts, didn't come about until like 2007, right? It was just the UFC, right? And MMA.
Oh no, it was actually NHB, no holds barred fight.
No holds barred, right? Or Vale Tudo.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of weird, because usually, historically speaking, in the formation of other sports, right, there was like football before the National Football League. There was hockey before the NHL, right? There was the sport before the premier organization to showcase the athletes of such sport, right? But theoretically speaking, the UFC is different, right? Because literally the premier organization was one of the first in North America to essentially do the thing. I mean, I know, I remember like tough man contests. I remember, like stuff on Wild World of Sport on ABC, but that. I mean, it was, but it was, I mean, it wasn't, basically everybody of all different, backgrounds and disciplines to do. Because remember what we thought, and I'm preaching to the choir, but in terms of figuring out what worked, right? We thought, oh, the bodybuilder, because you have muscles and everything like that, like you're a tough guy, or the guy at the end of the bar, and we would see an iteration of it in Tank Abbott, right? But like the karate guy, like who wins in all of this? The boxer.
That was the question.
The kumite, right? Exactly. And that first one, I mean, that first UFC, it solved a lot of questions, right? And I mean, to me, and this is how much of I don't know, I guess a dork in terms of like my love for combat sports, because like I float back and forth like MMA, pro wrestling, and to me they're cousins that are less distant than even they would think they are, because back when, I mean, most people credit boxing for ushering in, not just radio and TV, but pro wrestling actually did that even like I think a year before boxing did. Shooting wrestling is how they were able to shoot boxing and produce it for TV, right? So but to me, I sit around thinking like, what would Johnny Saint versus Eddie Bravo look like? What would Billy Robinson, who trained Shayna Baszler and Josh Barnett, we saw him versus Dean Lister, right? So I mean, actually Billy Robinson versus Dean Lister rather than Josh Barnett, at Metamoris. Like right. I go almost in those, I think they called it The Deadliest Warrior, a show on Spike TV, where they would basically get all weapon, like the military people or soldiers of different periods of time, and basically bet them up against each other, their strengths and weaknesses, and basically calibrate like 1,000 fights and who would win. And that's what I literally do, like when I'm just kind of sitting off daydreaming. But I could only imagine what it must have been for you to kind of see it in its like infancy and then go like, that problem got solved.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really, really interesting for me, even knowing what the what we were going to see from the Gracies. Just seeing what was going on, like Art Jimerson coming in with that one glove, because his idea was right that he was probably going to be hitting his opponent so much that he didn't want to break his hand, which most people I think at this point know that that's what the gloves really were created for. And were that did help was your hands being protected, not the face being protected. But yes, I think Art felt that he was probably going to be hitting so much with his hands that when one of them broke without the glove, he'd have the one with the glove that he could continue beating up his opponent. And I think he ended up landing a total of 0 punches on Hoist as Hoist came in. So that was interesting. Also seeing some of the Muay Thai guys. The fact that it was no weight divisions was a pretty crazy thing. And I think there were some examples of the weight not mattering when you had just a superior combat sports athlete in there against an inferior one. But I think as time went by, you started to see it did matter, especially if the skill was anywhere close. Just some of the smaller guys had really bigger hearts and could continue. But then I think it was eventually good that there were weight divisions made. But yeah, just seeing what was going to go on between the different styles was super interesting to me. And it's funny because wrestling obviously early on became a style that was going to give the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu a challenge, and the wrestlers probably already kind of knew that. I had seen some collegiate wrestling when I was younger on a couple of occasions, but was never involved. I really wish I was, but it's an amazing sport. But yeah, so when that came in, Dan Severn from my home state of Michigan, an older guy, came in giving Hoist Gracie a really, really tough time. And that was with just pure wrestling. He literally had no punching skill. All respect to Dan. Maybe he had as much as the average guy, but that wasn't for a professional contest that involved striking. But yeah, just seeing that and then seeing, like what Ken Shamrock was doing and seeing guys improve themselves and seeing what was going to go on with the rule set and the refereeing. It was really interesting. And then the changes in the sport and, it definitely was amazing the way it all unfolded. That's for sure. And seeing it all in its infancy, it's funny because combat sports other than boxing, like kickboxing never, unfortunately, really, really took off. As you know, it's more, at some points it was way more popular than it was, say, like in the 70s when it was full contact karate or the early 80s. But a lot of people just didn't think much of combat sports because boxing was the only thing out there. And I think that, like, when I'd be watching all this kickboxing and these karate tournaments, and I'd watch point karate, Billy Blanks for like the Mobile Oil team with his long Jerry curl hair. And, and people would be saying, dude, what are you watching all this crap for? What is this? What's wrong with you? I go, no, this combat sports is great. Let me tell you, I love all of them. It's like a chess match. And and the girls were like, what the hell, man? You're watching this silly, crazy shit,
Yeah.
And then like the U.S. Shidokan Open. I don't know if you remember that. Like I would see like San Shu with like Kung Lee.
Yes.
And then the U.S. Shidokan Open that had one round where you had to wear boxing gloves because you could punch to the face. Another round where it was bare knuckles, but you couldn't punch to the face and wear a gi. And then another round where it was like grappling with submissions and it's just all this.
Remember.
Yeah, right. I watched all that shit all the time, and I was taping it on my VCR on VHS tape, and I was buying VHS tapes bootleg from Japan.
Oh, we all did that shit. Like,
Nice, yeah.
I remember the first time, like, I would see like tape traders, and it's something that's definitely borrowed over from pro wrestling. Where like, oh well, and it's funny that you mentioned both Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn because they were both respectively NWA champions, and that's the same NWA that produced oh, Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes. Like
Yep.
in that lineage is also Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock. So I just think it's fun, like, but it's funny because like different evolutions, right? I mean, obviously way later because Uriah Hall was part of this incarnation, but Chuck Norris, he had like a karate competition where there's like a ring, like literally like a circle, like a pit, and you would basically it would point karate,
Yes.
but like you would really get hit. People were getting
Chuck Norris
knocked
League,
the fuck
yeah,
out.
like Chuck Norris Fighting League, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. In the early days, I'll tell you this: you guys don't see it too much now because Chuck is 80 years old. But in the early days, Chuck would go to every kickboxing and karate contest he could, even after he was famous. Probably all through the 70s and the 80s and like maybe really early 90s, he was there to support. He was constantly giving his name and his image showing up to these events to help legitimize them. So he really helped. And black belt under the Machado brothers. He started with the Gracies and then switched to the Machado brothers. And I think it took 15 years before the Machados gave Chuck his black belt. They really made him earn it, right? And so if you really think about it, man, who is more of a mixed martial artist of epic proportions, of like master level, than Chuck Norris? Chuck Norris, as far as a striker and a teacher in karate and stand-up, highest level black belt. I mean, the man's a master in striking arts, and to also be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So the reality is he doesn't have any wrestling. That's the only thing lacking. But to who else do we know has like a 10th degree black belt in any art, and also a black belt in a completely opposite art, And so even though he's 80 years old, which would make it hard for him to beat up too many people, still with those skills right there, being who he is, in a pinch, if a 25-year-old guy got too out of line with Chuck Norris, he's got options to knock their ass out with a kick to the head or to choke them unconscious pretty much. And he could probably do both if the timing was right and the situation was right. So big respect to Chuck Norris.
No, AG Elis Los Perros says, so jealous right now. Don't be, good sir. You're amazing. So never forget that you are amazing. So
big
there's
respect.
that, good sir. Absolutely. Now, I mean, the only person that, to me, that I would even say rivals Chuck's kind of acumen of all different, and the mastery of all different martial arts would be none other than CSW's Eric Paulson.
Yes, absolutely. Continue. I've been doing so much talking. I want to give the host a chance here. Yeah, Eric is amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Filipino Kali, I mean, British catch wrestling, which to me, again, it drives me insane. Where, like when people talk about like, grapplers just being, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, and I'm like, no disrespect to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but there was Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, there's Judo, there's Russian Sambo. Obviously, we're seeing it with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and literally every fighter that comes out of the Russian Federation now, it's just like, no, there's other grappling arts. You don't necessarily have to do a gi. Look at Sambo. They're like, oh, board shorts and like a gi top. Like, we can do that. And again, none other than Fyodor Emelianenko. That is the greatest product that Sambo basically gifted to MMA. So absolutely. I'm just saying there are other grappling arts, but I mean, again, this is somebody who, Eric Paulson, I mean, trained under the Machados, much like Chuck Norris. Yes. But the Chuck Norris caveat is the fact that Chuck Norris actually sponsored the Machados. Most people don't. Do you know the story?
No, tell me.
So essentially, he got them a working visa to work on, and we're talking John Jock, we're talking Keegan, we're talking about Carlos, like all of the brothers. He basically sponsored them by having them work on the show and then teach classes.
Nice.
So that's how the Machado, the original Machado brothers essentially came to America, and it was Chuck Norris that sponsored it. And I can't remember where I saw it, but it was both of them, both the Machado brothers as well as Chuck, basically saying how Chuck essentially brought them to the States.
Absolutely. That's very, very cool. And it makes sense because they were his teachers and he loved training with them a lot of years putting together. Let me touch back really quick on Eric Paulson. He is someone that, for those of you who don't know, you should look him up. Eric Paulson with catch wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I had him on my show about a year and a half ago. I actually had him on with his good friend, Greg Nelson, both of them Minnesotans originally. And having talked together, trained together, wrestled. And man, Eric Paulson, he made a statement once. He said the human body is just a submission waiting to happen, right? Eric Paulson knows so many freaking holds and unusual ones from his catch wrestling background, and competed himself for many years early on in mixed martial arts, and mostly was over in Japan, and I think was a Pancrase champion. I think he fought for the Rings organization as well.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And yeah, just an amazing wealth of knowledge. I believe he officially had sold CSW. If not sold, I think there's officially a teacher that he has in place that is running
Ben
it.
Jones.
Yeah. But still, the origin of it, and I think the flavor, and I think that he's probably still there being involved to some extent. And yeah, he is one of the greatest coaches out there, and really one of the true masters of submission and the striking. And I see your illustration comparing it to Chuck Norris. He did a lot of striking early on.
Mm-hmm.
He trained in striking arts first. So yeah, without a doubt, someone that's in the upper echelon of people to be respected as the true. I think we could make it a new phrase: mixed martial arts masters. We've all heard of the term martial arts master, but I think very few people are mixed martial arts masters. I can say this though: the young people fighting nowadays, which is good, with as good as they are becoming in so many different styles, I would be remiss in not saying that many of them really are like master level at what they did. But I think I'm designating these other guys who are not as familiar and who are a little bit older, in the fact that guys like Chuck Norris and Eric Paulson literally have like 40 years of striking martial arts training, and like 40 years of grappling training as well. And to me, that's like mind blowing. That's a master of mixed martial arts.
No, 100%. And I mean, so maybe being in the know, but Eric Paulson will always have CSW, but it's Ben Jones who basically, has taken a part in coaching the next phase of everything. And we've seen under his tutelage, guys like LFA title contender Jacob Little Badger Rosales, who obviously his name is derived from the Badger Ben Jones, right? Or Trent Moe, or Curtis Melender.
Yes, Curtis, a great guy.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. But all of them are kind of the next generation, one step beyond Eric. But Eric will always like kind of drop in, which is like cool as hell. Like, to have somebody like that that literally, Gary Padilla, Danny Inosanto, like he trained with all of them, and pretty closely.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Danny Inosanto, Bruce Lee's good friend and one of his top students, there's a documentary that I think you guys can find. I think you might be able to find it in its entirety on YouTube, but possibly not. But if not, I remember at one point they were charging like $1.99 or $2.99 to view it. There's a documentary from like 1975 called The Warrior Within. And it was kind of made as kind of a tribute to Bruce Lee from a lot of his friends and acquaintances. This is 2 years after he died, I think. Yeah, and they went to various different schools, mostly in the East Coast, and talked to a lot of masters from different styles. There wasn't Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu known in this country yet, so not that. But a lot of them talked about Bruce Lee, and then showed their some of their teachings, and then they gave their philosophies. And the music score was from Bruce Lee's brother, or one of his brothers. I think it was Robert Lee. And the Chuck Norris, the young Chuck Norris, you'll see at one of his schools. At one point, he owned, I think, a couple dozen karate schools. And you see a really young Chuck Norris there mentioning Bruce Lee and mentioning, what his thoughts were about martial arts and karate. Just a super cool thing to watch. The Warrior Within from like 1975. Highly recommended.
So you know what I'm doing for the next right after this. Like
Right
I'm going down. I'm going in a deep dive on this movie because I love shit like this.
No, you got to go deep into the woods. That's
what I do.
Yes, what you do, and you do it better than anyone alive, my brother.
Well, I appreciate it. I really do. And again, coming from you, that means a lot because you're somebody who I've taken great motivation from, great inspiration from, and you've always gone out of your way, with everything that you've learned and encompassed and let me sit under the learning tree. So I can't thank you enough.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for saying that, man. Your friendship means a lot to me, and I just appreciate you looking up to me, and I feel you're right here on that exact level with me, and it's great to know you, and yeah, anything I can ever do, man, you're a super awesome person and has respect for everyone, and it's hard to find nowadays, and. I'm an older guy, and you're a millennial, maybe middle millennial or older millennial, barely, maybe not that, but in your mid-30s there, you have an amazing old school respectfulness about you that's hard to find nowadays because I think it wasn't hammered in to people. Born in the 80s as much as it was to people born in the 70s and 60s. So you're an anomaly. You're a throwback and an old school guy in the best sense of the word.
I really do appreciate that. But my dad, and it's weird because this is December. Friday was like the 7th anniversary of my mom passing. Christmas Day will be the 10th year anniversary of my dad passing away. So to me, my dad always taught me, it's like, you're never going to know like where you're going to be going unless you know where you came from. And to me, that honor, my dad's Midwestern ideal is my mom from Fiji and carrying that kind of like honor, of the Pacific Island, to me and kind of instilling that because to me, again, you don't know. And that's kind of like the world that 2020 has pretty much encompassed, right? Where like nobody knows where we're going. Nobody trusts each other. Everybody wants to argue about what they're different rather than, figuring out what we have in commonplace. And to me, that's why I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination that, MMA was the kind of one of the first things to come back, post pandemic, or I mean, during the pandemic, we're still here because again, I when I see like politicians, when I see social media fights and amongst family, amongst friends, amongst, different opinions, I'm like, we can respectfully disagree, right? But like at some point we're going to have to get down and get to the brass tacks as, as Don Henley said, the heart of the matter, right? Yeah. So, it doesn't matter, like, I mean, not to say it doesn't matter how you feel or whatever, but at some point those feelings have to kind of come to a place where the person that feels on the opposite side of the spectrum from you, and you guys are going to have to talk it out. And yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, it's going to be like, I mean, just swallowing thumbtacks, right? But at some point, if you guys are earnest in, your belief and care and consideration of each other, then you can go like, okay, maybe that's a knock on the chin, but, we can move on from this. And again, no better, euphemism to use by example than combat sports, because I mean, no matter how many fights that I watch on TV that we are lucky and privileged enough to attend live, right? My favorite part, amateur to pro, is when that final bell rings and everybody's hugging and clapping, and literally two people, two females, two males, two whatever, right? At the end of it, of a war, literally eyes hanging out, blood dripping, sweat dripping, every type of bodily fluid dripping, in like literally in their undergarments in front of like hundreds, if not thousands of people. And they're like, we're cool. So to
Yep.
me, I'm all like, that's the greatest parable of 2020. It's just like we can put each other through hell, but at some point we have to be ones to raise each other up, and that's what I hope.
Absolutely. That's so important, that respect and honor. And, for those who had never thought of that, like Dana White says, if you don't know, now you know, from Mr. Adam Woods, and very, very important. The honor and respect is a huge part of our sport, because our sport is a martial art, and martial arts always were about huge respect. I remember when I was first learning, there was still a lot of embracing the Eastern ways of the being a true martial artist, being super respectful, honor. You don't walk on the mat ever with shoes, and which is still conducted in BJJ, but you actually had to bow in every time you came in the mat. And it couldn't just be like a quick thing. You had to find the highest ranking person on the mat, the highest belt, and get their attention, and then bow to get on the mat. And, just that, and the philosophy, I think a lot of it's lost today. Although I'm sure some schools still have it, but yeah, we are a martial arts competition, and martial arts is all about honor and respect. So yeah, with you 100% on that, brother.
Yeah. So, I mean, you come with a wealth of knowledge, right? And obviously, at the time, you were practicing, various styles. Which, I mean, again, like right now in 2020, MMA is its own martial arts, right? It's equal bits of a lot of it, and different schools have different ways about going about it, right? But I mean, at the time where you mentioned Chuck Norris and Dan Inosanto and Eric Paulson, but like we forget, like if you're of a certain age, it was taboo. Like if your karate instructor figured out, I had a little kind of taste of it when I was 7 and started karate, and I saw judo, and I was like, oh wait, they're slamming each other, much like I saw on WWF television. And I was like, I want to do the slammy thing, because I could be like Randy Savage and Bret Hart, right? Like, I want to do the slammy thing. And like, I literally got smacked, like, no, if you do this, you disregard everything.
Yeah. I think Chuck Norris was one of the first that kind of got exposed to that, as far as someone who's famous, when he had his style of Tang Soo Do, which then became Taekwondo, although I believe it's kind of come back in recent years, Tang Soo Do. But then I think he started to do Shotokan karate as well. So he went from a Korean art to a Japanese art, and a lot of people just did not want to see the arts mixing. They wanted their art to be pure, and they didn't want people to say, I'm kind of an expert or a master or even a participant in these various different arts. And, they had their reasons, for that. But yeah, back in those days, yeah, you weren't, schools probably, except for Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, or maybe some other really evolved schools. I know the American Kempo system with Ed Parker was also pretty open. But you couldn't really bring in stuff that was drastically different than what the style you were learning was, because albeit if you get to the black belt level, then to some extent you can be creative, but not before that, and especially if it was a completely different art. So yeah, Bruce Lee obviously was on the 100% right track, realizing that we do want to do that. That's the best thing to do. That to be balanced and to be knowing different arts is a great thing. But back then, I think it was really messing with tradition, and it's just like if you go to an art class, they don't want you to bring in your woodworking and start sawing something during art class, or those two might have some similarity. You certainly don't want to bring in your saw during history class and start sawing some wood, because they say that's not what we're doing here.
No, 100%, 100%. But I mean, obviously, pulling from all of those kind of influences, right? But at what point do you decide, like, not only am I going to be an active participant, but I'm also going to get like in front of the camera and start to do interviews, start to, do what would become the MMA Power Hour? Like, what was the genesis of that?
Well, when I first started watching the UFC, as mentioned, I had been familiar with the Gracies and Vale Tudo, which is what they called the no holds barred fighting in Brazil, and then when it started here, it was NHB, no holds barred fighting. I had been familiar with that, so I really knew what was coming in the first UFC, and I was talking it up everywhere. And from having participated in striking arts at that point for nearly a decade, I really knew what I was looking at in the striking. And not only that, but having been familiar for two to 3 years prior to that first UFC, didn't have any level of expertise at all, but I was becoming very familiar with the grappling. So I understood more than most, save for people like the Gracies, Eric Paulson, John Peretti, and people like that understood a lot better than me. But I understood a lot better than the majority of America what we were seeing. And so I was really explaining it to my friends, and a lot of them would say, man, you should be the guy out there doing the commentary. Because remember those early days, there was a couple of random guys, and Jim Brown and Bill Superfoot Wallace and Kathy Long, who I met, who was an amazing kickboxing champion. Big respect to Kathy Long, the Punisher. But yeah, and so they'd say, dude, you could do better than these guys. You know this stuff. You love this stuff. You're and I had done some acting on a small level before then. So I was kind of doing the commentary for everyone that would watch the fights with me. And starting at UFC 1, I would be watching it with at least 2, 3, 4 buddies for almost every event, every pay-per-view. And so I was always interested. There was the public access thing then, but I didn't get into it. I really should have. I regret that I didn't, But as years went by and Joe Rogan came in, and I have a huge respect for Joe, they would say, man, you're like the second Joe Rogan, man. You could do it. You could do it. He's doing it. And I just remember thinking, I just didn't know of any avenues to get there. Plus, we already had Joe Rogan, so why were we needing me, right? And then I think as time went by, it was something that I thought I should get into, but I just was always doing other things. And then my producer and business partner, Adam Rorta, suggested I do a podcast about something else. And when we started, we were just a podcast. And I said, you know what? I said, I'd rather do one on MMA. And he said, yeah, MMA, great. Because he had been involved in a small level, being in Iowa, where everyone's involved in wrestling, and a lot of the guys jump in and do the smokers, as he mentioned, as he did. He had been out of touch with it for more than a decade, though, and we jumped in right away, and 3.75 years later, here we are. But yeah, I just right away I took it seriously. Right away, I knew I wanted to do a good job, and it's something I love doing. It's a passion, just like it is for you. And doing a great interview is super important, and just the respect that you and I both have for these athletes is huge. And I'm just a huge fan as well. So that really helps me be able to think of some of the questions that I think of on the show, and when I go to press conferences at the UFC. We're so glad to be UFC press credentialed, going to their events, and it's like a huge treat for someone that's been a huge fan from the beginning, and I've been a huge fan of martial arts. I mean, when I was a little kid, I would sometimes go, when I was 10 or 11 years old, down to the corner store to pick up some candy or whatever, and they used to have like a kung fu movie on TV, and my parents were watching something else, so I couldn't watch it. So I'd stay there at the store watching for like 45 minutes or an hour, with a TV, little tiny TV next to the Ms. Pac-Man game, arcade game that they had in there. And so just, something I've always loved, and it's a treat to be able to get in there and meet people like yourself and who have the same passion and talk about it. It's a big love of mine, an important part of my life.
No, 100%. And I mean, I love that you mentioned he's not the other Adam. I'm Woods. He is Dr. Adam, right? Adam Roeder, talking about the power source behind MMA Power Hour. So how did you guys meet? And like, when did you guys start to like, hey, maybe we can do something?
Well, we were doing a sideline job together. And we would hang out, work at a desk not too far from each other. And he had done live streaming when he was younger. And it was like in his mid-teens, I think. And he said, I really want to try to create like a studio of shows. And so he picked me, he picked his now ex-girlfriend and a couple of buddies. And the only thing he said was, I need you guys to show up every week at the time we agree on, and, just keep doing it and keep grinding. And they just, I think one of them did it for 3 weeks and gave up. The other one did it for 2 weeks, and the other one did it for 5 weeks. And they just said, I can't, keep doing this, and I just, I was deadly serious about it, and so was he. And we just kept on rocking. And lots of hours later, our original shows, and you can find a lot of our older shows on Facebook. Random shows are up on YouTube. Mostly we were Facebook based. And we never really pushed YouTube. So you'll actually see some shows on YouTube that Adam just threw up there as an afterthought, where we got 40 or 80 or 100 views. On Facebook, many of our shows have 25,000 views. So we were getting a lot of love there. And but yeah, that's how I knew him. We're both the power behind the MMA Power Hour, but definitely as far as the technical and the graphics and everything, then yes, without him pressing that power button, he is absolutely the power behind the presentation visually of the show, and the music and the graphics and just the live stream and everything. And he's also a great part on camera as well for me to bounce things off of and to go back and forth. We have a lot of fun.
Oh, and it definitely exudes from the content that you guys put out. And Irv A says only Chuck Norris can knock out Chuck Norris. No, yes. that is absolutely fact. That's
proven fact. Chuck Norris deserves his status way up here in the upper echelon of everything. He's a stud.
And the only thing that would rival it would be Chuck Norris, obviously.
Unless Bruce Lee came back to life, But I will tell you this, who was teaching grappling at different points to both of them was my friend Judo Gene LaBelle, right? And even though he also was, I think, learning some striking from both of them. And you know what? I just realized Eric Paulson, I think, also at one point, I think, may have studied under Gene LaBelle, being that Gene's a lot older. So I can't believe this, and I know Gene is very busy, so I'm hoping now maybe he doesn't watch this, but how I could have left Gene LaBelle out of that category with a Chuck Norris and an Eric Paulson is baffling to me. So Judo Gene LaBelle being older than both, he was 8 years older than Bruce and Chuck. Bruce and Chuck were actually born the same year, 1940. So Chuck is 80 right now. Bruce obviously deceased since 1973. Gene LaBelle is 88 years old now. Gene LaBelle was a two-time judo world champion before judo was in the Olympics, or before United States was participating in judo in the Olympics. He was two-time AAU, which is world champion, same as an Olympic champion. Prior to that, though, he was learning boxing. I mean, he was very young when he did that. He was in his early 20s. I think he won a gold medal when he was 22 and a gold medal when he was 23. He had started to learn some boxing and even a little bit of catch wrestling a couple of years before that. But shortly after his winning the 2 judo world champions, he started learning more boxing and more catch wrestling. And so in reality, there's no belt level in boxing, but Gene won the first American or first MMA fight based in the United States against
Milo Savage.
Yep, in 1963, who was actually a top 10 or top 15 ranked heavyweight boxing champion. And I think Gene was probably 170 pounds to that guy's 195 pounds or whatever in that fight. Gene had good hands. Gene was learning to catch wrestling. Judo, he was a master at. Then he started learning striking as well with karate from Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. So in reality, Gene LeBell is absolutely right up there. Not only that, he was a teacher of the grappling to Chuck and to Bruce Lee. You should look on YouTube for an award for like Man of the Year or Teacher of the Year or something to Gene, where Chuck Norris shows up impromptu as a surprise and says a lot of amazing stuff about Gene. But yeah, Gene LeBell right up there as one of the true masters of mixed martial arts, having done the judo, having done some wrestling, having highest level submissions, and a man that could throw hands. So forgive me, Gene, if you do watch. Well, I may have had temporary Alzheimer's, not to belittle that, but yeah, Gene LeBell up there certainly with Bruce, with Chuck Norris, Eric Paulson, John Peretti, people like that.
No, 100%. And I mean, talk about, because he's just as important as he is to not just judo, but MMA.
He's really the godfather. Godfather of MMA.
No, 100%. And when you think about it, right? So he was Eileen Eaton's son. Eileen Eaton ran the Grand Olympic, the LA territory in pro wrestling. That saw the likes of Superstar Billy Graham, Rowdy Piper, the Guerrero brothers. Like there's a litany of people that came out of the Grand Olympic Auditorium, and basically Judo Gene was her son. Right. And basically, if a wrestler got too big for their britches, well, or didn't want to drop the title because the title meant money, that meant your drawing power, or what have you, they would send in Judo Gene. Like basically, if some guy didn't want to drop the title, okay. And mysteriously, your opponent for the night would mysteriously vanish, but out walks out Judo Gene. And you know what happens? Well, the guy with the belt lays it right down in the ring, literally goes out the back exit of the Grand Olympic Auditorium, never to be seen in the territory again. So that is Judo Gene LeBell in essence. And again, you know, that's one of the cool things about, you know, being here in Southern California, because I mean, up until he retired, you know, we saw Uncle Gene, as a lot of us called him, and his wife Midge, you know, basically as judges for you know, CXF, the precursor to what would be Lights Out Extreme Championship.
They were a big part of the athletic commission. Gene was part of the athletic commission, judging, I think, for 20 years. Only about a year and a half ago or two did he retire. I'll tell you two quick Gene LeBell stories. Sorry if I interrupted your flow.
No, please, good.
So one of them was, I asked him recently which year that he was judo world champion was a better feeling, like a greater accomplishment to him, or was like the better experience. And he said, well, the first year, I think the competition was in Japan. And then I think he said the second year, the competition was at the Olympic Auditorium. And I kind of went like, and I said, did they realize that your family owned that already? He said, no, I don't think so. And I said, and I said, it didn't matter because it's a real sport. There was no choreographing it, and there was no, you know, there was no fixing the fight clearly. But I said, wow. I said, it was literally at your family's, and he said, yeah, it was a good feeling. He said it was really, yeah, it was great. It was a good experience to be right there in our auditorium with my family and all my friends there. Yeah, he said it was really cool. But how cool is that? I mean, isn't that like they said, well, we want to do it in LA. Let's try this Olympic Auditorium. Why not? And his mom said, let me see the judo championship. Let me see my sons in it. All right, why not? And so that was a trip to know. Second one is that there's so many stories from him, and I'm going to give one that I'm sure, and none of them are bad, but just I don't share too much stuff that was shared in person. But I think this one I would say for sure he would be okay with. He was young in his early 20s. They were doing wrestling, and his mom called him up, and he was doing his hitch in the Army. I think he volunteered, and he was here stateside, and he was like 20 years old or something like that, 21. And his mom said the valet for Gorgeous George didn't show up, and we're on tomorrow on TV, and they're not going to show up. They can't make it. The plane, or they're snowed in, or whatever. We need you to come and throw the flowers out or walk in front of, And they said, well, let me ask. So she said, you got to be here, So he asked his commanding officer. He said, look, it's the weekend. I need a leave to go and take care of some urgent stuff with my family. And the guy said, nope, denied. And so he said, please, it's really important. And we don't have anything scheduled here except for relaxing in the barracks or whatever. The guy said, nope. So he checked, and there was no important event that he was going to miss. It was just, for whatever reason, the guy didn't want him to leave, and his mom begged him to go there, and he wasn't going to miss any obligations at all on a Saturday in the Army. And so he went. He went and did it, and he rushed back. He rushed out in the middle of the night and rushed back in the middle of the night or something. And didn't miss anything. This guy said, no, we were relaxing, cleaning the bunk call week, Saturday. So I think he said it was a few days later, the higher ranking, their CO, the guy in charge, called them to attention and did for an inspection of the barracks or whatever, and said, Mr. LaBelle. And he said, I don't frequently watch wrestling on television, but I did the other day, and I think I saw you on there, and I had told you you're not to leave the barracks. And he said, sir, he said, that was a kinescope recording. That was done several months ago. So rest assured, that's older footage. I wasn't at any wrestling this weekend. The guy looked at him and said, okay, fair enough. And then I think he said when his hitch was up, he talked to the officer. The guy said, you're a great officer. I want you to stay on. And he said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be doing that. I've got other things I do need to pursue with all respect. And he said, but I did want to tell you one thing. I did want to apologize and say that a year or so ago, you were right. I had snuck out because my mom really needed me to help out with the wrestling. He said, I do it all the time. I knew it. I didn't want to say anything because you came up with a great answer so quickly. You deserve to be let go on that one, But it was a great story, man. He's just such a sharp guy and such a legend and such an amazing dude. I'm so privileged, to be able to talk to him and be a friend, So I mean, some of the things like that, are such a dream come true for me, as a benefit of doing the interviews. And I did a 70-minute, the longest interview I think I've done with one guest. Excuse me, allergies here. Was when we interviewed Gene LaBelle. It was 3 years ago, 2017. I think it was late 2017. But he has a library of photographs with so many movie stars and amazing people that he worked with, and they were his personal photo collection. So Adam was able to cascade them throughout the episode, and it's just amazing. And we didn't have the visual on Gene; he did it on the phone. But we had these amazing photographs of his career and so many famous people that he worked with. And so you can still find that. It might be on YouTube, but it's definitely on Facebook under videos of the MMA Power Hour or my Colin Crandall file.
Oh my God. Yeah, you sent me down two wormholes. My goodness. And I don't think, Irv says, great show so far. Thank you. No, we're having a great time. But I don't think we could, I mean, top a Judo Gene getting out of the army, like literally reversing the Pauly Shore and showing up on TV with Gorgeous George, which, I mean, talk about a draw in terms of the pro wrestling and in any combat sport. There might not have been a greater draw than Gorgeous George
Yes.
until literally 30 years later in the 80s with Hulk Hogan. So just to
Yes.
show you how big that was. And yeah, that commanding officer, hopefully, you've made amends with Judo Gene, but that's a phenomenal story.
Yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously you've gotten here, but there's been so many people that have helped you along the way. So I want you to go ahead and get some acknowledgments, or as the kids say, shout outs out of the way.
Wow, man. I mean, just so many people that supported. My parents, although they had passed, my dad from heaven before the show started had passed, and my mom, I know, believed in me. My brothers, friends, girlfriends, past girlfriends, even, um, Adam, Adam Rorda, Adam Woods, people that were there cheering early on Facebook, from Opoku and Lamar and Ron and just let me think. Just my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brothers out of Fabiano Iha and Paulo Tiago, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Big respect to them. The earliest, biggest star guest on our show, Pat Militich, came on really early on. A huge thank you to him, because I think that possibly were it not for him, Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn might not have come on in a few weeks after that. And then when Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock came on, and I was able to say I've interviewed Pat Militich, Dan Severn, and Ken Shamrock, other people were saying, all right, let me jump in. And so early on, the people that had faith in us and jumped in, Kung Lee, I really want to thank Kung Lee a lot. And it's funny because I have not mentioned this anywhere before, but in the earliest days, I had so much respect for my guests. I literally just wanted to make sure not to talk about anything they didn't want to talk about, and to only talk about stuff they wanted to talk about, and to, I still have all the respect in the world to not interrupt my guests and let them speak. But I kind of was always wanting to make sure that we did everything in the interview exactly to what my guests wanted. But a lot of times that's putting a lot of pressure on the interviewee to have to set all that crap up. And I was doing the same thing early on with Kung Lee, talking to him prior to the show. And he said, you know what, man, whatever you want to do. He said, it's your show. He said, Colin, and you're having these celebrities on the show that you have great respect for. And he said, and that's awesome. And he said, but this is your show. You can ask the questions that you want to ask. And obviously, if you're not being disrespectful, there's no reason why, your guests won't be happy to be on the course that you want to be on. So it's, certainly make your guests comfortable, but just realize that, this is your show. You can have confidence and talk about what you want to talk about with them. And that really meant a lot to me. It's just like literally, when he said that, I'm like, wait a second. That's right. I'm like, you know what? I can do this. I will still be the same way with my respect to my guests, but maybe I don't have to choreograph and coordinate and spend all this time having them select all these subjects and all this stuff, because they don't need that pressure. It's not their job. It's mine. And I guess I can do this. And that helped me have a tremendous amount more confidence than I had to deal with these famous people. And so a huge thank you to Mr. Kung Lee for that.
Oh, that's, I mean, I guess it was Jessica Simpson. She said in a song, at the end of the day, a little bit comes a long way, you know, and I mean, it definitely did that for you. So I want to, Mario Yamasaki, the essence of Kung Lee and what he did for you, because again, it just takes a little bit of somebody showing confidence and faith in you to do what you need to do. And look, it's carried you over for almost a half decade long career. And I mean, a lifetime of, pursuing, everything that is martial arts and reading up on it. So, man, I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible. Like, I'm going to hold my MMA World Awards figure of Kung Lee a little bit tighter tonight, knowing that the man who inspired that figure also inspired the hell out of my friend, and one of the best MMA based shows of all the internets, of all the world, the MMA Power Hour.
Thank you so much, man. That really means a lot coming from you, my friend. It really does. It's awesome to know you, and you do a great job. I love the interviews that you do, man. And so, people, according to Woods, this show is legit, as you guys already know. And so you just keep doing the great stuff you're doing, man. You are a wealth of knowledge. And I think that if you take the worlds of pro wrestling and MMA and some boxing, I think even if you look at who has the most knowledge, including all of those worlds, I think you are the master.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to work diligently to make sure that I don't have your fears get dashed and your faith in me get dashed. But speaking of, before we dash, where can people find out more about you, MMA Power Hour, and what you guys are doing and putting out fantastic content week in and week out? Where can they find it?
Thank you so much. Well, probably no one can now find out more about me anywhere than in this interview. This is really the perennial Colin Crandall interview. I think I've done one or two others that were a lot shorter, that were maybe wanting my opinion on just a few specific things. But this is really like the bio interview, of Colin Crandall, and I think that so you can look here for that. MMA Power Hour is on every Wednesday. Starting at 6 p.m. We go from 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time. We've done that for a year and a half. Some of our early shows were 3 and even 4 hours long. So you should check out some of those early ones. We'd have like 5 or 6 guests even, I remember. But we go 2 hours, and Fight TV is FITE.tv. You can get the app or you can get it on your desktop. It's absolutely free, as is our show. Tons of free content there. There are pay-per-view events. They don't push them on you. They're there if you want to choose to order them, but otherwise they're fine with you going up and looking at their free content. And our shows that we record every Wednesday stay up there. So you can go back and see a huge archive of past MMA Power Hour videos. We also air on a 1 week tape delay on the For the Fans channel, also known in some areas as 11 spelled out 11 Sports US, on ATT, Uverse, and DirecTV, Roku, Pluto. I think on Pluto it might be on like an 8-day delay or a 14-day delay sometimes, but they'll show it a couple times on that day and a couple times on the weekend as well. And on Facebook as well, we'll put up clips here and there. And Adam says he's going to start doing more, Dr. Adam Rhoda, as far as that. And we're going to start probably trying to embrace YouTube even more, a lot more, because we haven't much at all in 2021. So we appreciate all the support. MMA Power Hour. Feel the power.
Dang right. I feel it. I feel it. Oh, it's surging me. It's surging all over me. But Colin, I can't thank you enough for not just the hour that you set aside for me and the viewing audience of According to Woods today, but I mean the years of friendship. It is one that I hold so close and so dear. You and Dr. Adam are just incredible, and what you guys have down the pipeline is incredible. So you guys check out MMA Power Hour everywhere, across all platforms. I have, you should too. But if you haven't already done so, we warmly encourage you to to like, share, and subscribe to According to Woods on both Facebook and YouTube. And I mean, Colin, you're subscribed, right?
Absolutely, all the way. According to Woods is awesome. By the way, thank you for that great statement. Your friendship is invaluable to me as well. Yeah, According to Woods, check them out. Don't miss an episode. And sometimes in a week you'll see several. So this man here, let me point the other way over there, wherever there he is awesome. According to the Woods, subscribe. Don't miss out. Or as my friends in Scotland would say, subscribe.
Subscribe. And if you don't believe me or Colin Crandall of the MMA Power to subscribe, well, here's pro wrestler Zeta Zhang.
Hey, this is Zeta Zhang.